lot of feelings while I was down in this environment. Some of these projects would last well over a month, where we essentially lived inside the volcano for extended periods of time. I remember feeling in between the moments of like exhilaration and fear, of course, all of those things. You are a speck. You're very acutely reminded of that in a place like that, inside the earth looking out. There was a oneness in that, something very profound. There was a sense of gratitude, not just being among the few people to stand in a place like that, but also just to be alive, because you're very reminded of the fragility of your life when you're in a place like that.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Love Conquers Fear podcast. I'm going to give a short intro this time. Gave a long one last time of all the different things going on. One of the things that I'm doing here in 2026 with my theme being embodiment is I mentioned I'd be revisiting my favorite books of 2025. I read probably over 55 books in 2025, really all these amazing books on AI, consciousness, spirituality, quantum physics, and some other topics as well. Couple of novels, as you know, I've talked about Dan Brown's The Secret of Secrets on here. I'm diving back into The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav. And that's a spiritual classic. The foreword to that is written by Oprah Winfrey for the 25th anniversary. And Gary Zukav also writes a new foreword for the 25th anniversary. And it's just an amazing book. And it's a really interesting one to think about right now because, the world is in a state where there's a lot of focus on external power. As I've covered in this podcast many times before, we have around 50 times the amount in the world of nuclear weapons than it would take to destroy all medium to large size cities in the world, send the world into a nuclear holocaust for a decade, darken the skies, and kill, billions and billions of humans and untold numbers of animals as well. And this is a time in the world where there's a lot of focus on this external power. And the Seed of the Soul is all about cultivating authentic power, which comes from evolving beyond the five sensory human, as he calls it, into multi-sensory human. And it really dives deep on leading from the heart, the shift that's undergoing in our evolution. You saw in the episode that I did with Chris Beisch, where we talked about the shift underway right now, evolutionarily, with humanity. And, a lot of these books really sync well with each other because I think there is a universal truth. So I would very much encourage you, Gary Zukav was a recluse living in the forest, didn't even have a TV. And Oprah Winfrey was so moved by his book that she found out how to get a hold of him and ultimately, gave him a huge audience. He became very popular after being on her show. I think she said it was something like 36 times. And it really changed her entire life. And I'll tell you, it'll change your life too. If you embody what's in that book, then it'll help you have a heart shift. And it's written by a guy that I would consider to be a real prophet. One of my goals here in 2026 is, just like I had Chris Beisch on the podcast as someone who had read his book twice last year, I'm reaching out to Gary Zukav, and we'll see what happens there, right? It's a stretch, but you never know. And there are a lot of people in the spirituality space that are hoping that business and capitalism will also have the heart shift needed so that we make it to this age of abundance for all. So I promise to keep this short. I'm going to dive right in. I've got a guest today that is one of the great entrepreneurs that Deborah and I have invested in via our family office. And he is a really extraordinary human being with an extraordinary story that got him to be doing what he's doing today. So welcome, Sam Cossman.
Thank you so much, Brett.
Yeah.
Great to be here with you.
What an honor to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here, and I love the work that you're doing, and I'm grateful to be in your orbit. So thank you for having me on.
Well, I knew that Deborah and I needed to invest in you when when I ultimately found out what you were doing with firefighters to really not just save their lives, but save the lives of the people that they're trying to save. And so you have a very incredible way that you got to that. Why don't we start back at volcano diving? It's kind of hard to believe that you did that and that you're sitting here alive in front of me today. And I know that was kind of a viral moment for you back in the day.
Yeah, people ask me that question a lot. They are curious to know why one would even find themselves in the heart of an active volcano and what would compel someone to do that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I would say at the core of it, the answer to that lies with just a very human quality, which is curiosity.
Yeah.
And that's something that, of course, as someone who's now 44 years old, has evolved, in terms of the quality itself. But I had that since I was a kid. I grew up in Georgia on some land, and I have a twin sister, so she and I would often find ways of entertaining ourselves in our childhood, which usually involved exploring the woods behind our house, finding little things to float on and floating down the river from very early days. And looking back, I attribute some of my adventurous spirit to those little moments. But as I got older, my parents really instilled a desire to travel, see the world. And it wasn't until I did that, in college that I started to really understand, the inequities of the world.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, shined a light on some of the challenges that I thought, as a human growing up in this developing part of the world, I felt a sense of responsibility to somehow make the world a better place. I didn't know exactly what that was going to be, but as a young person, I pursued adventure, something that kind of made me feel alive inside. I loved the idea of just getting out, learning about new places, coming back with stories and things to share. And I would say maybe in the early days, it was somewhat, selfishly motivated. But over time, I realized that the value of going to these places to pursue adventures were much bigger than myself. And at one point, I had a chance to go to a volcano that was it was part of a project that I had put together as part of an earlier startup that I had done, and it was in a part of the world that I had heard about just literally through a book, but it sounded like a real life Mordor, this place that had this.
Mordor from Lord of the Rings.
From Lord of the Rings, yeah. And
my favorite book ever.
Okay,
by the
good
way.
to know. I should have called you back then.
Yeah.
I got to go pretty much as a film extra. I kind of helped incubate this adventure idea, and BBC picked it up as a film job. They funded it, and I found myself sitting at the top of a volcano in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on an island nation called Vanuatu. And I don't know if I fully appreciated what I had gotten myself into until I was standing at the edge of this crazy volcanic cliff. But deep inside the volcano was one of the world's only lava lakes, which I just found so fascinating. Like a lake of lava, the size of an ocean, it seemed, 400 meters down inside this volcanic shaft. And the idea of seeing the forces underneath our feet that are usually invisible, and having a perception of what would otherwise be just theoretical is such an exciting thing to be able to see with your own eyes. So that was why I was motivated to go there. BBC, I think, got nervous about the idea of going down to the shore of this lava lake, which is a very unusual and unpredictable phenomenon. There's only a few of them in the world. And so they left all their gear and got a few shots from the top and left. So some friends...
They were worried just about filming it, period.
Yeah, from halfway in, much less going all the way in.
Right.
Long story short, that resulted in a couple of friends that I was there with deciding to go into this crater, which very few people had gone into, to the bottom of, and go and check it out, explore it, learn about it, experience it. So it was a somewhat harrowing descent down to this very remote place. And of course, I was reveling in the excitement of it all, of just being in this remarkable place that so few people get a chance to see with their own eyes. But I thought it would be a great story to tell, and to share some of what I've learned about being in a place like that. So I made a little video. I'd never made a video before, but I captured some footage with the thought that maybe I would piece something together. And on the return, I wound up opening up my laptop and making a little, I think what wound up being a 2-minute video. The first one I'd ever made. I created a YouTube account just to post it because I had nowhere else to put it, with the idea of sending the link to my mom. And I went to bed that night after I arrived back in the United States, and I got a call from Good Morning America asking if I had seen, my account and what had happened overnight. And much to my surprise, people took an interest in it, and there were millions of people that had clicked on that link.
Right.
And so that was kind of the first moment that I realized this thing that I loved doing, others found it interesting, and it was kind of a moment of authenticity, which is I think a word that you just used that I connect with. I think a lot of people tend to gravitate in their life to whatever the external world thinks they should be doing in a given moment, and a lot of young people are not quite sure how to turn their passions into an actual business of sorts. But it was a lesson to me that, if you actually, follow your passions, whether you try to turn them into a business or not, some amazing things can happen. And for me, that was getting the attention of the world and getting the opportunity to do a lot more of that kind of thing, which I did for a number of years after that.
I mean, there's a lot of prep that goes into not, extinguishing yourself in terms of going into a volcano. And, one of the things that comes to mind is, Alex Honnold, as we're recording this, is about to free solo a building in Taipei. He does that Friday as a live Netflix event. So that'll already be done by the time this goes live. But I'll never forget, watching free solo and the 60 Minutes on Alex Honnold before that, and then being at TED and seeing him speak at the TED conference about the movie Free Solo, and he's like, "Hey, spoiler alert, I survived," right? And one of the big points he made at that TED conference in his TED talk is that he practiced that 100 times before doing it as a free solo. So he was really giving a talk where it's all about preparation. So how do you prepare to go into a volcano like that and know that you're gonna, or hope, I guess know you're gonna survive. I'll say it like that.
I mean, it's a fair question, and I'll answer it by maybe bringing up a kind of talking about it from a different perspective. The thing that first volcano that I went to in Vanuatu was really my foray into exploring more regions like this, and I found that people were so fascinated by it, and it was largely driven by the fact that they're still such a misunderstood phenomenon, and they're all over the world, and they pose danger, and they are destroyer creators. There's this great paradox about volcanoes that I think people have been, I've never met a young person or an older person that didn't have an equal fascination with these, natural wonders. And so for me, that was the stepping stone to pursuing more of that, but less from the perspective of actually just getting the thrill of being in this otherworldly place, and more from the perspective of what can we learn about it and how can humanity benefit from that. And to do that, I realized that, it's not really a solo effort. While we were descending into extreme environments, and there were very technical climbing aspects to it, and a lot of earth science elements that needed to be navigated, it was as much about identifying the right team and the right skill sets to pair together. And in many cases, they were ones that had never been brought together to deliver something of value, to come away with some not just a story, but knowledge. And so, to answer your question directly, obviously, I spent a lot of time outdoors, climbing, understanding, how technical equipment that would be required to descend into environments like this and to survive, knowing there's all kinds of dangerous gases and things of that nature. So there's definitely an element of preparation with equipment, but the way in which you would prepare oftentimes came down to what we were trying to achieve. And with that first Vanuatu project, that was the first of a number of projects that I did, and they all had a different bend, a different objective. And depending upon what we were trying to achieve, we would prepare in different ways. I'll give an example of that. So one of the last projects I did was in Nicaragua, and I don't actually know if I've ever told this story out loud or on camera, but it was an interesting origin. The short version of that is that someone reached out to me while I was doing another project in Guatemala. It was an email that I received with an incredible video of what looked like a lava waterfall. And it was from a concerned Nicaraguan citizen who said, this just emerged practically in my backyard. I'm in a town with over 1 million people, and a lot of people are concerned about this thing that has kind of awoken, if you will. So I was given an email address and told not to communicate where I got it from, and I didn't know whose email address it was, but I was told that person could help me pull something together to help understand more about what was causing this kind of volcanic eruption that it sprung to life after hundreds of years. And it turns out that email address was to the president and first lady of Nicaragua, who after a couple of weeks surprisingly responded to my email and invited me to come and do a recce to see what could we learn about this place. And it led to an expedition where we were developing a proof of concept early warning system, looking at volcanoes as, instead of just like through a singular lens of seismology or some other kind of very narrow field of science, we were looking at it across the whole spectrum of phenomenon, which was much more cross-cutting. And this was some years ago, but it was, I would say, before the whole AI revolution really kind of exploded. But the idea was to like a human would go to a doctor and say, I have something systemically wrong with me. They wouldn't just check your temperature or look in your ear. They would do a whole holistic workup. And that was kind of what was missing in the field of volcanic science that we thought would be quite interesting. To do that, of course, we needed to pull together all these people who had never been inside active volcanoes. We needed to get pieces of equipment that were hundreds of pounds down to the bottom of the shore of these lava lakes, which were hundreds of meters down in these inverted walls that you couldn't just rappel down into. And so to prepare for something like that, it was less about rappelling and climbing and more about ingenuity of developing zip lines to the bottom of very active volcanoes, which had never been done before. So the preparation there involved working with civil engineers, working with firefighters, working with rope access technicians to think about, how would we, bring all these people that needed to do the work that we were doing down there seamlessly and be able to extract them out quickly in the event of a crisis of some kind. So I think there's kind of the internal preparation, and then there's the external preparation. And internally, I think it's very, very similar probably to what Alex and others go through, which is mentally manifesting things and practicing things mentally, and of course sharpening your skills, and harnessing the power of staying calm under stress. But externally, there's a lot of factors as well that have to do with building teams and thinking cross-disciplinary, and thinking really outside the box and like keeping that sword really sharp as well. So there's a range of things, and every project was somewhat different. But the through line there was, to your point, be prepared for anything, have a plan. Things will always not go exactly as you imagined they would. So have a plan A, B, and C. And then have the right people around you.
What type of equipment do you have to wear to make sure that it can withstand that type of heat? I mean, I can't even imagine. Like how hot are we talking about as you go?
The surface of lava is about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's warm. Interestingly, it's actually not that much different than being at the edge of a being, in the heart of a fire and a fully involved, house fire, for instance. The temperatures are actually not that dissimilar. So that's obviously very hot. It's hot enough to melt metal, and when you see lava, it's something that always surprises people. It surprised me was that lava, it looks, especially when you go to a lava lake where there's quite literally, it looks like the Bellagio fountain, except it's made of fire.
Except it's made of fire, right?
And
not to be touched at all.
Not to be touched. It looks like a fluid, but it is the density of rock. It is a solid, and so part of the issue is the temperature, because if that comes into contact with you or your equipment, obviously will instantly melt or compromise it. But also, it's the same density as rock. So what may look like a little splash might also be a big boulder coming your way.
Right.
The temperatures are they kind of fall off as a function of distance and something that might impede the radiant energy that's coming in. So if there's a rock between you and the lava, the temperatures fall off precipitously, very quickly, linearly. So if you could find something to block yourself from the radiant energy, by ducking behind something, you could actually get very close with just modern firefighting equipment. We would use these silver suits that you might have seen in some of the National Geographic videos.
Yeah, we'll include some links in the podcast notes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of what we would use would come from other industries, and I love that idea because that's like the very definition of innovation in a way. Just repurposing existing things to kind of forge new ideas. And in order for us to gain access to these environments, we had to use equipment that was designed for steel mill workers or aviation firefighters. The silver suits were one of those examples. So we had those. They were just thin, aluminized steel, and they had different materials inside that were thermally resistant, things like Nomex, that again are used across industry. And there were some visors that had gold-plated material to reflect a lot of the radiant light and energy that would come your way. At the end of the day, it was still very hot, and if you got really close, as we did, you're feeling it, and it's hot from the outside, but it's also extremely hot from the inside. So we would, we at times used some of the cooling systems that are used by NASA astronauts, and the goal being to, continue to be able to do the work without being exhausted or have your physiological condition compromised. Because once you're in there, you're in there for 8 hours. It's a long journey in and a long journey out.
Really? So
Yeah.
it takes that long to just descend and then come back up.
Yeah, the ascent was usually longer. Dropping in was, gravity was kind of on your side.
Right.
In some of the projects, we would use these motorized ascenders that kind of look like a little motorcycle of sorts, gas-powered systems that you'd start up like a lawnmower and turn with a throttle and basically climb your way out. And you needed them because the walls were inverted. You couldn't just walk down.
Right.
They were, oriented in that manner. Then other times we were using these zip lines that we instrumented, and but they were always manually driven.
Right.
And so we had people at the top hoisting, which required big crews of strong people to pull you out one at a time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a long distance, so a lot of.
I mean, the videos we'll share in the notes are just mind blowing. It's seeing it as an observer is just like it's hard to even fathom. And I absolutely love nature, love going on hiking trips with my wife, Deborah. What was the most beautiful moment as you're doing this where you just have to be, I'm sure you're just in a place of absolute awe and wonder it, even like, here I am, Sam, doing this and seeing this lava lake, flowing. I mean, what were some of those moments?
I had a lot of feelings while I was down in this environment, and at times some of these projects would last, well over a month, where we essentially lived inside the volcano for extended periods of time, and then there were other times where it was just a kind of surgical strike, and we had to come out for a variety of reasons. But there were some moments there that I remember. I think you described it well. I remember kind of feeling. In between the moments of like exhilaration and fear, of course, all of those things, no one would not be fearful in an environment like that. It is,
Right.
you are a speck, you know, and there's, you're very acutely reminded of that in a place like that. Perhaps that might be one of the distinct feelings that I remember having. And later I did some research on that feeling that I had, and I discovered that it's also a feeling that, you know, many astronauts feel when they're looking down at the pale blue dot and they see everything that ever was in one little speck.
I mean, our whole galaxy is a speck in the entire vast universe.
Correct.
That, as far as we know, is infinite.
That's right. And perhaps, you know, theoretically, you can imagine yourself out there looking in, but, you know, astronauts, obviously, as they're sitting in the ISS looking down at Earth, they're left with their thoughts for a long time. And that phenomena apparently was called the overview effect, where they have this sensation of smallness, but in an inspirational kind of way. And I remembered feeling that way, but maybe to some degree like the inverse, being inside instead of outside, you know, inside the Earth looking out.
Right.
There was a oneness in that, you know, something very profound. And you know, it definitely was awe-inspiring. There was a sense of gratitude, I would say, from not just being among the few people to stand in a place like that and actually get to feel that, share those feelings, but also just to be alive, you know, because you're very reminded of the fragility of your life when you're in a place like that.
Yeah.
Like it could literally be taken away in the moment. And I think that kind of begs a bigger question, which is like, why would you put yourself in a place like that ever? You know, who would? It's like the Darwin Award, you know, someone jumps into a volcano.
Right.
But for me, the theme, you know, in my life has been pretty constant. And I've never quite reverse engineered exactly where this came from, but I think it was probably from a sampling of different influences, including those of my parents, who spent their careers doing things that they loved that were to the betterment of humans in one little way or another. My mom was a I call her a baby whisperer. She was a nurse practitioner, lactation consultant. She loved helping new mothers for their first month of life, which was so important. And, you know, as a father who's been through that now, I've come to appreciate the role that she's played, but she loved it. And my dad was always about education and reading and books and sharing of ideas, and wound up spending 30 years of his career building a bookstore that was kind of a cultural hub for young people in a place that didn't have much of that, you know, in North Georgia.
Yeah. How cool.
And so I remember growing up feeling like, okay, that's what life is supposed to be. You know, you're supposed to create something that you're passionate about that helps other people. And I never really put too much thought into it. I never marinated on that, but I think just it kind of seeped in over the years.
Well, you're raised that way. I mean, all the books I've read on spirituality, they all sink at a common root, which is, you know, you have to develop yourself to be the embodiment of love conquering fear, and then you can help others do that, and then humanity ascends. But the highest form of service that you can do in a lifetime is service to humanity, especially selfless service to humanity.
Yes, and I totally agree. As a young person, I didn't know exactly, personally, I didn't know what form that would take. But one of the lessons that I think I emulated from my parents was just finding something that you really enjoy, with the thought that if you enjoy it, you'll get good at it. And if you get better than anybody at it, you'll excel in it.
Yeah.
And if you excel in it, then you have power to be able to affect real change. And that was kind of a through line, I guess, in my life. But the basis of it was always, once you achieve those three things, you can actually help people.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think, you know, I started off loving adventure and exploration, and I later realized that there was so much of the world that we didn't yet understand. And yet we live in this amazing time of abundance where, you know, new technologies were emerging that would allow us to learn about the world in new ways that we hadn't seen before. And I remember going to, you know, as I got more into this world, I went to the Explorers Club, and, you know, there's a lot of old white men sitting around, and not to knock the organization, actually, it's transformed in some very exciting ways, I think, as the years have gone by. But I remember hearing the thought that, so much is, we've kind of already seen it all and done it all, and
No, we're not even close.
and my conclusion is that we're barely scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And I think as technology makes its way into people's hands, and we're thinking about new ways of using it, like there's just so much to be done. And so as I wound up getting deeper into this world, I realized perhaps I can combine my love for discovery and the curiosity that underpins that, and you kind of overlay that to problems in the world. And that became the kind of through line as I did more and more projects.
Yeah.
Because I later discovered that there were hundreds of million, like 800 million people in the world that lived exposed to volcanic threats, which is just one little sliver of, problems related to earth science and volcanoes. But that was a big number.
That was a big number.
Yeah, that caught my attention. I never thought that I was going to, and I still don't think that I'll ever, plug a volcano and prevent it from exploding. But if we can understand these phenomenon more, then we can take steps to kind of avoid crisis, and we can improve livelihoods, and we can, and that was kind of always the thinking around like taking on these projects. So kind of coming full circle to the topic of preparation and, justification for even being in a place like this. It always was underpinned by this idea of, I'm just one life, and I don't have a death wish by any means. I was always, as much as
Alex
anyone.
Honnold doesn't either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine so. He's got a child, and he's got a lot of reasons to live.
Yes.
And I feel the same way. But the calculus for me was, if by going into a place like this, I could actually have an outsized impact, and I can do it moderately, safely, and that's a subjective term, but then the costs are dramatically outweighed by the potential benefits.
Yeah.
And then your fear kind of fades away when you think about all the good that can come from something. So that was kind of what was going through my head a lot of the times when I was in those crazy hostile places, was what a privilege it is to be in a place like this, seeing these forces that are these invisible things that we read about in books, but so few get a chance to see, while doing something so, with so much gravity, and with so much potential positive human impact. It was always, there's a level of gratitude, that came from it. I also remember some specific moments as I was descending in on the zip line, just looking around and almost feeling like transported, because by this time the sun had fallen, and the illumination of the lava underneath was just ambiently illuminating everything from within. It looked like the surface of Mars, and I remembered feeling like so foreign in this place.
Yeah.
And it reminded me that the world is still so big and so vast, as are the unanswered questions, and I feel inspired by that. But yeah, there's a whole range of emotions. I think you're fearful, cool. You're grateful, you're exhilarated.
One of the pushbacks I get this actually a lot, is, what does humanity do once it achieves real abundance, like abundance across the planet? I've talked about Chad, and how Chad as a country in Africa, the continent of Africa, has a GDP of $660 a person versus our 85,800 in the US. And so things like, a hot shower would be a massive luxury in Chad, like stable electricity, clean water. And I think that we're going to, as humanity, be able to turn Chad into an oasis, just like we've turned the U.S. into an oasis after a lot of development. We're in the 0.1% of all Homo sapiens that have ever been in existence that have experienced electricity. 99.9% of our evolutionary time, we haven't even experienced that. And I get this pushback like, well, does that just mean we're all going to kind of meditate like they do in Bhutan, which that's actually where we went over the December break. Oh, wow. and amazing place, very, very spiritual place, is known as one of the happiest countries on earth. Mm-hmm. And, you can really feel that. You can feel the contentment there, which is so beautiful. And I'm always like, you're thinking too small. Like, there's a universe out there that is completely infinite and vast. And the ambitious among us, which are plentiful, will want to go out there and explore that. And there's no end to the curiosity. And in the lattice, that's what I explore, is once humanity unites through the protagonist, Dr. Alexander Bliss, and his audacious idea to get humanity to unite, then there's this unprecedented technological takeoff. We conquer faster and light speed travel, and there's just all these amazing things that happen as a result. And just on Earth, I mean, there's so many things left to do.
And I think that's the proxy here is, if you extrapolate that to kind of the greater universe, there's an untold amount of things to learn about, to discover, to explore.
There's hundreds of millions of galaxies.
Exactly.
Alone,
and interestingly, if you take things out to the nth degree on getting to a point of abundance where perhaps you have this technological liftoff of sorts, in a sense, I could see how we come back to kind of our most human, like fundamental human qualities, right? Of which creativity, is one, of which exploration or desire to kind of see beyond is another, the desire to do good for one another. So those are the
communal activities is another, just being with each other, having the time versus the constant, like, just trying to make ends meet.
So it's interesting to contemplate, where that inevitability goes if we can get there, of course.
Yeah, because there is part of humanity that will take the path of, like, the Bhutanese, which that's great. No judgment about that at all. I think that's fantastic. Like, if humanity returns to a more communal place where we can really selflessly love each other and go on voyages together and not have so much scarcity to deal with. But I am very convinced there is no end to human curiosity ever. I
agree with that sentiment. And curiosity, a quality that I think our modern world squelches a bit, just by virtue of the busyness of life. I don't think it's an intentional thing per se, but when I think about my younger self and as I grew older, kind of how that little spark kind of, there were moments where it felt like it was kind of fading a bit, until I was reinvigorated by some other thing that I came across that was an undeniable kind of draw for me. And in some ways, how our educational systems work and kind of, optimizing for the lowest common denominator, there is a tendency for that curiosity to kind of be tuned out a bit. And it's something that I would, if you were ever to get to a world where there was true, kind of abundance in that way that you've described, then I would imagine something like that fundamental quality would get unlocked in adults as much as they do as we see in children. And who knows what the net benefit of that could be.
Yeah. It's the thing I'm most excited about near term with AI is just this ability to shatter the barrier to creativity.
Yeah.
I've been a long-time entrepreneur, started 6 different companies. And, when I was out there constantly speaking about how to take this entrepreneurial path and hopefully become successful with it, I think people were personifying me as a guy that, has been programming since I was 7 years old, et cetera, et cetera. And now that barrier is being shattered for the better, because creativity is plentiful all over the world. And there's a tremendous amount of capability that people have innately, but slogging through all that rote work to get to it is really, really tough.
Yeah, there's always such an interesting paradox between, the democratization of something that was held by, the fortunate few who perfected a skill versus, the net benefit perhaps of of like making that available to all because of the inherent qualities that we all possess as humans, and we are all creative in one way or another. I definitely have heard the argument by like professional artists that, you know, the negative around what happens when anybody can create, and, you know, everybody's repurposing each other's works. And I can understand that from that perspective. You've dedicated your whole life to something, and it, you know, you have a certain view of what that should look like, and you know, a certain need to protect. On the other hand, you know, when there are tools that allow someone to express creativity by way of a skill they've never had that they get to unlock, so they get on the other side of that, and anybody can access it because it's just ubiquitously available through free applications, you know, derived from AI.
Right.
That's a pretty exciting, you know, concept.
Yeah.
And I think we're there in many ways. So I see kind of, you know, both sides. But I think, like with all things, and like with AI as an example, I think, you know, my personal opinion is that the good will outweigh the bad.
Yeah. Well, as you and I are recording this, episode 32 just went live today with Michael Collins, which is making an amazing documentary on intuition, and about how it can really be fostered in young children, especially through different schools that allow them to do what would be considered miraculous things, that we all innately have these abilities that can be cultivated. And I met him on a trip in the Grand Canyon in August, which is amazing. Like the presence you have with each other.
Did you go on a rafting trip?
Yes.
That's an incredible
277
experience.
miles.
Yeah.
Have you done that before?
I have, and that was a life-changing experience for me.
How cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've never talked about that. And, you know, it's the same thing, being in a volcano, which I've never done, for a month. You know, that would be the same type of experience where you're just completely bonding with the people there. There's nothing there but presence. But one of the things that happened there is that one of the people that went on that trip writes for TV, and he was pretty dystopian at the beginning of the trip with me on AI, just like what this is going to mean. And I wasn't intending to turn him, but, you know, we're just talking a lot about how this is going to play out. And one of the things he educated me on, which I just didn't know, just totally ignorant to it, but makes complete sense, common sense, if you really thought about it, is that, you know, the storyline for a movie or for a TV show, they only have a certain budget to shoot it with. And so if you get it wrong, it's not going to be a very good movie. It's not going to be a very good TV show. And so I was like, well, imagine, you know, using things like Sora, you know, from OpenAI and you know, Google's VO 3 or 4 or whatever they're out to now, and using these to prototype like ideas and see kind of how they sit. And don't you think over time that's going to make us much more creative and make the content much better, because you're getting to try out new things to optimize within that budget. And as we work through it, you know, by the end of the trip, he's like, actually, I'm like really excited now, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to kind of frame it up for someone who might be kind of sitting on the edge, because it is, you know, in that sense, it's a true utility, and you get to maximize the, you know, the output based on, you know, the cost saving nature of like trial running on some things. I think where people get a little, humans tend to take things to the nth degree. They just take it all the way out. You know, it's job replacement. It's like the loss of true creativity. It's the proliferation of other people's ideas all blended into something. But I stand by, you know, my thinking. I think there will always be a world for both. We're kind of getting a little bit off topic here, but it's like a book, you know. Yeah. Books are never going to go away, right? Of course, we have the Kindle and we have all these digital formats and podcasts and things of this nature, but there's always a world for a book. You know, a physical embodiment of someone's ideas, and in some ways, the value of those things get greater over time because they become more rare in a way. So, by the same token, the idea of like spreading, you know, positive information by way of these digital means. Of course, there's, you know, two sides of this coin, but it's a very powerful thing. Right. and to create content more effortlessly, and to, create new genres of media. I think could be pretty interesting as you think about that.
So I want to shift to this amazing experience you have in nature with volcano diving and all the preparation that goes into that, all the teamwork, all of the equipment you're building and assembling to actually make it even possible, to what you're doing now, because we invested in what you're doing now. I don't know what we would have said if you was like, hey, would you invest in me as a volcano diver?
Smaller market. Yeah.
Right, smaller market. But you had your sponsors,
Yeah, true.
So, what you're doing now really, really hit me and Deborah in the heart in a beautiful way, where, you've really taken that skill set to develop this new age helmet for firefighters that not only helps save their life, but helps them save more lives. I'm a very spiritual person. I would say that there is some divine guidance there. But it's just a beautiful arc in your life that you would go from that. A lot of people listening to this or watching this would assume that person is an adrenaline junkie and is going to just continue on that path. It'll be like the next, crazy thing. Go to the lowest point in the ocean or whatever it is. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but you actually took this to go into a place, taking those learnings from growing up with your parents. I grew up with very similar types of parents, to say, I want to do something really good for humanity. So I'd love to talk about the transition into that.
It's interesting because I feel like most of my life has been these like very seamless transitions where it almost had happened, just poetically in a way. And looking back in hindsight, it's like, it was an incredible story, and that natural transition just seems so seamless, but it wasn't planned. And I think therein lies, perhaps a lesson in life, that some of the best things are never planned. And maybe there was some divine intervention. Right. Who knows? I can't claim that, but for me, it originated, I think, like many founder stories, where you're doing something that you love and you have a problem for yourself. I wasn't necessarily trying to solve this particular group's problem. I just discovered that as I was trying to safely navigate these austere environments inside these active volcanoes, a problem that kept cropping up was we just couldn't see. It was a lot of toxic superheated gases that made navigation very difficult. And to that end, there were 50 people on these expeditions, and we needed to communicate and make quick decisions. And that was all very difficult with the tools that we were being given. And we were very fortunate in that, some of the big companies that make the gear that these various industries use were, giving them to us, sponsoring us. So we were very grateful for that. But, we had these SCBAs, the air that sits on a firefighter's back that they use to breathe in these smoke or gas-filled environments, which worked perfectly for our needs. We had silver suits to protect us from the radiant heat. We had radios that allowed us to communicate. We had thermal imaging cameras, which was a technology that had been borrowed from the military to see through smoke and through particulate. And they were all fine, and they all worked. And many of the people that were on these projects were familiar with them because they came from military backgrounds or first responder backgrounds. But the thing that really struck me was that, specifically as it related to seeing, was that in order for us to see in many of these environments, and then we had a couple really scary moments where a superheated burst of 700-degree gas would belch out of a nearby vent, and we just literally couldn't see where we were going, and you had to take a step in a direction, and you're running out of air, and it was intense. And it dawned upon me that the idea of having to let go of a rope, which we needed as a lifeline to hold up a camera that you could see, a small display that had a grayscale image like a film negative, just to be able to understand where you were, so that you could then put it down and grab the rope and be blind again, just really was such a, it just didn't meet the need. To put it bluntly, we did our best to not take unnecessary risks. But I would say there was definitely a couple of moments that we got lucky. But those moments, those experiences, especially as it related to the people that I was there responsible for, is what led to me scouring the internet and looking for perhaps solutions that firefighters were using or other people were using, and I stumbled upon what I thought was a product that I could buy. In some cases, to do our expeditions, we would buy things necessary, and other times we would build things. And I found this very futuristic looking stormtrooper-like helmet that appeared to see through smoke, and I later discovered that it was a very talented designer overseas who had come up with this concept, but it was just a concept. And it's ultimately what led to me, working with this individual to realize this idea that was, purely for the sake of benefiting our team.
All right.
And so I pulled together a cross-functional team of folks that had a very different, a very diverse set of backgrounds and skills, and we built this helmet-mounted vision system to see through smoke. And really the rest was history. Firefighters heard about it and said, if you bring that to us, you're going to change the game for our community.
Wow. So they heard about it through videos and YouTube and
correct.
stuff.
And it started off small, and I was thinking, here I am doing this work. This could really benefit hundreds of millions of people. But as these inquiries continue to come in, I realized that the number of people that could benefit from this specific technology, which I later realized vision was just a small piece of it, really kind of transcended that in so many other areas and industries, was so much bigger. And I'm constantly thinking about like, okay, well, I'm only going to live for 50 years more at best, maybe longer if we hit some big breakthroughs.
I think it's going to be longer with the age of abundance for all.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to
be some major health tech breakthroughs that you can't even.
I believe that as well. But nonetheless, the time is limited, and
yes,
and we have to make use of our time here on Earth in the best way that we can. And I came to the conclusion that this was a very noble, worthwhile thing to do that was going to benefit a lot of people, and that was before I really fully understood, the plight of firefighters and specifically, first responders, but specifically firefighters. As this story goes, we had created something that I thought, would be useful in the world. And so my natural thought was, as a non-firefighter, maybe I wasn't the right person to bring this, to this community. There's probably better people than I. And I thought that, really humbly, just, I would imagine that folks who already make this kind of equipment have a lot of trust already established, and those companies would be highly incentivized to make something like this real. So, and I was a bit of an idea starter, that was kind of my sweet spot that I like to operate in. So I took this invention, this tool that you could put on your head that combined some new technologies, augmented reality, thermal imaging cameras, computer vision, AI, and wireframed the environment that you were looking at in real time so you could more rapidly understand what you were looking at and navigate more quickly to the groups that make this equipment. And much to my surprise, the reaction was disappointing, to say the least. And I sat down with the executives of the monopoly that is the fire industry, and the conclusion that many of these folks came to after realizing, wow, this is the future, was firefighters aren't ready for this, which I later realized was just a ploy and not true at all. And the realization that I think profits would be cannibalized if they out-innovated themselves, which is the classic Clayton Christensen, innovator's dilemma, right? Which makes sense. And it's just...
Innovator's Dilemma, definitely one of the best books I've ever read as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was like unraveling in real time. But what it did for me is I realized, okay, maybe I will be the person that brings this to this community. I don't think I realized at the time, that it would be a journey to, quite a journey to get there as it wound up becoming. But because I think for many, it seemed like such an obvious thing that should exist in the world, but there were a lot of forces that kept it from being so. And it took about 10 years to get something that was, kind of looked the part, worked the part, and to align all the incentives with, the industry and the customers and the technology and everything to kind of eventually arrive at a tool that I truly believe is going to, well, not just change how fires are fought all around the world, but how humans, perceive and how decisions get made in, high stress, time sensitive environments, which spans well beyond fire, of course. But part of the motivation to continue building this was when I learned as a non-firefighter what the state of the art was today. And this is to this day it still amazes me that. And talking about abundance here, we live in Austin. I get to work every day in a self-driving car, and I was in the medical device industry prior to this with robotic tools that people were operating on bodies across geographies, and so many amazing things exist in the world. But today, the state of the art for firefighting, which is a kind of entry point to what the bigger play that we're working on is, you go into the building, you listen for the screams of the baby in the back room, you literally close your eyes because that's what you're trained to do. So you heighten your senses of hearing, your other senses, and you basically blindly feel around in the dark. And firefighters are really good at it because that's what they spend 90% of their time doing is training. But, just because you get good at doing something that's extremely inefficient, does that mean that we shouldn't invest in making it better? To me, the answer is definitely no.
Right.
And
I bet you most people listening to this do not know that that's what they have to do.
Yeah, and I'm somewhat simplifying it, but that's the level of crudeness to how the work is done, and the net result of that is that firefighters spend a lot more time in those really toxic environments than they should, and that leads to many firefighters who are much younger than me getting cancer, and it's the number one reason for line of duty death amongst firefighters now is being in those environments. By the way, things aren't made of traditional wood the way they used to be. We have so many new building materials and chemical compounds, IKEA furniture and the like, that they've done studies on what it takes for a fire to kind of spread. And it used to be that a traditional room in a conventional sized house was 40 minutes before it would become fully involved. Now with all these modern building materials and fabrics and different petroleum based materials, it's 4 minutes. They're literally an order of magnitude less. So you have less time today to get out of a burning building than you did 40 years ago. And all of that lends itself to, you need to do more with less. And the threat is evolving. People are doing this extremely noble work, and they're doing it with primitive things that haven't changed in 40, 50 years. And it's a scourge. It's still blows my mind that the industry is, kind of where it is. And I've come to understand why, largely, external corporate influences. But it's just so exciting to think about this future that we're now upon after 10 years in the making. Having launched a product, it's a tool called See-Through that we've created, as you know. And
the name of the company is Quake.
Yes, the name of the company is Quake Technologies.
QWAKE.
That's right. There's a story behind that, of course, as well, from my prior work. But the product itself is called See-Through, with the idea of you can see through the data, see through your eyes, and actually make sense of your environments, make faster decisions. And what we realized is that just flipping the lights on for folks who are operating in these dark environments, smoky environments, was just like a piece of the puzzle. But really, what I came to appreciate was that in the history of the fire service, in the 250 years of American fire service heritage, no one has ever taken anything more than a tiny little processor into a fire that could do one thing, basically. And that was a much smaller percentage of the overall history because processors didn't exist, up until fairly recently. But turned out that the reason for not being able to take anything with a cell phone level of compute or greater was because of some physics challenges related to the internally generated heat from having processors required to deliver AI in environments like this. So, the bottom line is that everyone's benefiting from AI, except arguably the people that need it the most.
Right, the people that are quite literally saving lives.
Yeah, and so that's become a real, motivational thing for me and for our team, who have been very self-selecting, a group of people who could, very smart, could do a lot of different thire lives, and they choose to work on this because I think they realize the outsized impact they could have in an industry that has just been left behind. And now that's kind of what we've unlocked is we've invented a system that can take essentially a supercomputer into a fire that has all kinds of sensory perception abilities. Obviously a primary one is a high-speed thermal camera, and we can make use of that compute in the moment, right there in these hostile environments to make sense of that environment for the person that's operating right then and there. And that is an unlock that, is so, pivotal for the industry. I think it really will change the trajectory of things. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this, obviously, as someone who's like dedicated, my life's work to this. And I at times will run into, more traditionally minded people who say, well, you're taking this piece of technology into the fire, and what happens if it breaks? Or, what happens if, there's a condition where it doesn't work as well?
Right.
And I've spent time thinking about that. And one of the things that always comes to mind is, well, that's for every breakthrough, there was always that question that was being asked. And in the case of firefighting,
right.
Many people said the same thing about the air that they breathe, which is like indispensable. It's like one of the three things that were created in the fire service that like changed the game. It came from the space industry and was borrowed, and like many things in the fire industry, it gets borrowed from other industries. But people
I would
thought,
say like many things in every industry.
Exactly, to your point. And people thought, well, you can now breathe inside the fire. It used to be really cool when you'd use your beard to like, smoke dive, as they called it. That was considered manly and, a sign of bravado. And then later people were getting cancer and it became less cool, of course. But for many people, the idea of having this like cheat code to go deeper into the fire was possibly a risk, because then, you could stay in there longer and you could get farther into it, and you may have difficulty finding your way out. Well, now we look back at those moments and we're like, that was dumb. It's actually required by law now, and you better not go into that fire without a breathing apparatus, because, you'll be fired. And you likely won't come home to your family, more importantly. And I think we're seeing a similar, shift in, how people are viewing this. My prediction, at least very acutely on this application, is that, young people growing up who maybe are coming into the fire service now, they will have a hard time imagining a world where firefighters didn't have an assist like this, some AI capability that's helping support decision making and helping people see and hear and perceive the world around them as they're making these critical decisions to save the lives of others and themselves. And I have some strong beliefs around that because of the support that we're getting from Congress and others in positions to affect laws that would be similar to what they experience with SCBAs and the breathing apparatuses. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see what is possible now after 10 years in the making, and what will be possible tomorrow, and where this can go even beyond firefighting and public safety and industrial applications and other types of national security efforts. And we need tools like this, and we need to get out of our own way and break past those innovator dilemma kind of boundaries. So I'm proud of the work that our team has done to take this from a concept and from many prototypes over the years into what is now a commercial product that's living on fire trucks and literally in this very moment probably being used to save a life, which is something that's
amazing.
It's a deep moment to contemplate how something that you might have created could actually result in a mother, hugging her child once more, who may not have otherwise been able to do that, or a firefighter coming back to their crews who would have otherwise become disoriented.
And I really encourage people to visit your website. I'll put a link in the show notes, but just to see what the display looks like. I mean, it's really kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because the immediate thing that catches your attention is this edge detection perception where everything you're looking at has bright green lines like Tron or Matrix, which people think that maybe we inherited because we were just trying to be futuristic, but actually there's some science behind that. And my co-founder came from a brain machine interface lab and was a neuroscientist and had done a lot of research on learning and, perception. And it turns out there is a very particular part of the electromagnetic spectrum that the eyes most naturally and most quickly kind of discern. And it's this very, very electric, yellow-green color.
Yeah.
But therein lies some of the paradox of the fire industry as well, because, fire trucks are red. So you expect them to be yellow, as they are in many other countries for that exact reason.
Right.
But, therein lies the one of the wonderful things about firefighting, which is this treasuring of heritage, but the counterproductive things as well, which is that sometimes we realize something is not good for us, but we hang on to it anyways because it's sentimental.
Right.
Rather than, because, knowing that perhaps there may be a better option and foregoing that. So one of the things that we've had to do as a startup, which I'm sure many, many others also have gone through, is to navigate, the delicate dance between, preserving the importance of heritage while also mapping out the future and, breaking some molds. I think especially the younger generations who are kind of coming into the job now really appreciate the importance of doing both.
Yeah, I mean, this is it invokes a book that was so popular for so long called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes, of course, I remember that book.
It's just, we do have sometimes a tough time adapting when it's changing the paradigm. And that's part of human nature and part of what will eventually transcend as we evolve into this age of abundance for all.
Yeah, agreed.
Agility. I remember it was 2024 where the number one word that popped in my mind as we were entering even the AI age, it was November 30th of 2022 that ChatGPT came out. Yep. So, we're just over 3 years into this. At this point, was agility, like just adaptability, like just that trait among humanity was going to really need to continue to evolve and be embraced.
Yeah, definitely. And that the need for adaptability, that is a core skill that gets ingrained in firefighters. There's a lot of repetition, that goes into kind of doing the job well and safely. And adaptability has always meant one thing, but in the industry now, it's beginning to mean something different. Like the unlocks that can happen from correlating thousands of data points that are happening inside an environment, whether it's to help you, find your way out, like a self-driving car from inside out, or whether it's to cross-reference, seeing what it means when like a temperature is changing and there's airflow going on one side and there's a victim on the other side. Like all of those things together mean something, where you could deliver an intuitive cue to someone who's got a heads-up display. Adaptability, very much is like the very definition of that word, I think, will be changed as it relates to firefighting anyways, because the ability to react to new cues, to new information quickly and swiftly, is evergreen quality, but it will just manifest in new ways as we kind of get into the next chapter of this.
Well, how do you look at that? I mean, you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur at my core. That's the main thing that I've done my whole career. Investing has just been on the side for us, but we're in 150 startups. We've been doing it for 16 years. And number of VC funds as well. But how do you look at how humanity is going to make it to this age of abundance for all, and this exponential curve we're in, where you've got not only AI that is being prioritized like humanity's never prioritized anything before, with money, energy, time. You have quantum computing, which is going to supposedly be stable and really come online in 2029, the same year that Ray Kurzweil projected we'd get to AGI in his book, The Singularity is Nearer, where he reaffirmed that from the original book, The Singularity is Near. You have, brain-computer interfaces. You have robotics that's going to come online in a huge way, and it's all going to play out in this next 10 to 15 years. And, the reason I've been doing this is, writing the book, Love Conquers Fear, Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All, the podcast, is to help humanity have the heart shift. The meta message of love conquering fear, first of all, is in all the spiritual text. That's in every one of the roots of spirituality. But it also is just the only way I see it playing out for humanity to make it into this age, because it's one of those moments where with great power comes great responsibility. We're going to have technology that's so vastly powerful than anything we can imagine to do great good, like firefighting, augmented reality, helmets to save their lives and other lives, and all of the different plans that you'll have to expand that out to other categories. How do you kind of look at this moment, and think about it with your children and everything else?
It is. It's a daunting concept.
It is. Yeah.
It's like with many things in life, whether it's related to startups or just life in general. I tend to there's actions are driven by other actions, and forcing functions become kind of the means by which good or bad things happen. And humans have kind of proven many times over to have a endless amount of potential to positively affect outcomes when they're aligned. But you don't have to look much further than the internet and X and the headlines that there's a lot of fractured thinking right now, and there's a lot of problems in the world. There are, you can't ignore that. And so when I think about this world of abundance, I absolutely can see the potential of that with the confluence of all these technologies coming together, and at this very present moment, and all the resources are getting thrown towards it, as you reference. But it does kind of make me wonder, what type of event would have to happen to realign everybody's thinking in the same direction. Because right now it does, my strong sense is that there's more people, there's as many people that are saying one thing as they're saying another, and there's this kind of opposing force that prevent us from being as efficient towards that goal as we could possibly be. And there's a lot of people struggling in the world, and there's realities to that. Right. It's a privilege to be sitting here and having this conversation and talking about that, because it means that we're not suffering in that same way that others may be. So I think part of it is, part of what I think about is what would have to be true in the world for everyone to realign, or to at least to some degree align in this more similar direction. And I'm not sure what that is. I think there could be a range of external factors. Sometimes you scare yourself so much into something by way of some, fear-based thing that, you just kind of get awoken into what really matters. God forbid there was a nuclear threat or anything of that sort. But we've seen the country and the world come together over similar things, right? War and other factors. I certainly hope that that's not the case, because that would be an ugly chapter if that's what we had to go through. And perhaps sometimes you have just tremendous breakthroughs which are possible, which just change our perception of maybe those struggles go away, or they're greatly reduced because of not only does everything cost less to make, so it's more affordable, but you have less need for money in the first place. Maybe there's a realignment around just the economics of that, right? The 10 to 15 year time scale is interesting. And I'm sure there are people who are a lot smarter and more tuned into this whole world that have reasons to believe that that's the timeline that we would see those results. In some ways, I'm very aggressive when it comes to predicting things, but in other ways, I'm perhaps a little bit more conservative in my thinking. I think ultimately I do believe that we will get there. Maybe, but my sense is that maybe that timeline's a little further out. And or at least I tell myself that, so that I don't just check out, and my kids don't just check out. You need the skills, the hard skills to navigate the world that we have today, and to hopefully see the world that we'll create tomorrow. But I do think a lot about the point that you brought up around how you communicate this with your family and your kids. And I've got 3 kids, 1, 3, and 21. I've got a good range there, and I have spent a decent amount of time thinking about what are the skills that I would want them to foster and to cultivate that would prepare them for that world, for the world that we have today and for the world that is to come. And
how are you guiding them on that?
I wish I could say I was doing an excellent job. I think I'm doing the best job that I can. But some of the core things that come to
That's how I
mind.
feel about everything in parenting.
Exactly.
That I'm trying to do the best job I can. We
There's
have 2 kids, 16 and 21.
Yeah, unfortunately, no user manual there. Otherwise, I would have read that a few times over. But I think some of the fundamentals are evergreen. But so being a good person, holding yourself to a degree of integrity and honor. I don't think that in any world that will never go away. If we're to remain human, that we have to uphold some of those values. There's going to be, and there already is, a proliferation of crazy amounts of information that we're going to get bombarded with, and through algorithms we're going to be targeted. So it's all going to seem very real. And I think discerning, understanding how to even evaluate what is real and not real, even if it means using certain tools, because it's imperceptible to our human eyes and brains, is a big part of it. Is like really seeking truth and knowing what utilities will help you do that, and not just going along with the popular narrative or the headlines, because I think that's dangerous and can misguide us.
Well, we're being algorithmically programmed.
That is true.
It's much more profitable if you want to put profits over people to try to hijack the amygdala, just because of the way we've evolved. We've had scarcity for so long that our fear center is very, very well evolved, and that's where people go after that, and algorithms seek that. I do think the youngest generation and the younger generations are really going to be more like Neo in the Matrix, to say we don't want this world.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of evidence of that. Alcohol use is plummeting, social media use is going down among the youngest generation. But it's definitely a tall order. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm 95% certain that humanity makes that. I'm trying to do everything I can. And I know a lot of people are out there doing everything they can. There's a lot of people showing up, and as Chris Bache said, God's sending in the troops right now to really make sure that we make it.
Yeah, I think.
But I think technology is going to force us to make the choice, because I think that we're going to be able to glimpse, and you're in my lifetime, it's not going to be that long, where we're going to be able to glimpse abundance. And I think that in that fateful choice, humanity will make the right heart shift at the right time to glimpse it. And, the lattice was a attempt to say, here's a positive way where, on how it could happen. We're not doomed to repeat the atrocities of the past, but it's going to be an intense, I think, build up to that over the next 10 to 15 years.
It is, yeah. I agree with that, and there's so many unknowns still that. But the good work that you're doing and that so many people are doing right now, I think tips the scale in the positive. And,
trying, yeah, certainly trying. I mean, it's amazing to think how many guests I've already had on, and I think it's like 5 that are 100% certain that we make it out of the guests.
That's pretty good odds. Yeah.
But there's real challenges. I mean, there's a lot that we need to transcend in terms of our nature. But if you think about it, technology really has forced changes. There was a time in this country where slavery was justified for labor, and the Industrial Revolution came along, and it was like shocking that we ever treated human beings that way at all. And machines took over that ability, where it led to the Civil War, and so I think that we're going to have such abundance that it's going to force humanity to make the heart shift. Because if you think about the root of lots and lots of conflict, it's been about land and resources and all of these things that have been because of scarcity.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And the resources have a way of landing in the hands of the few, and the few don't have the means and the tools to be able to secure them on their own, and therein lies some of the problems. But yeah, there's so many great examples of where technological revolutions came around and unrooted those challenges, and I believe that will be true here for us as well.
And you're a part of it. You're a part of it.
Thank you. I
think about the karmic beauty of what you and your team are doing, for humanity, and where that's going to go. We're in the very early innings of just AR-based technology, sensor-based technology. I mean,
yeah, it is very interesting to think about how AI will be used to help. I mean, especially in the sector that we're focused on, obviously firefighting, public safety, and just general, industrial applications. Humans have always been limited to the tissue between our ears, our senses and our hands, and we make the best decisions that we can. But at the end of the day, we're human, and we're not operating as a hive mind. We're just putting one foot in front of the other and using intuition and judgment, all very valuable things. But the unlock that comes from infusing AI into the mix and unleashing the collective intelligence, which I think it will now be possible. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about the future of what we're doing, because what are the limitations of just putting a headset on someone's head is that it's just still one human, and those human systems still fail, right? You have connectivity and different things, but if you can figure out a way to build a level of technological resilience by bringing AI to these very localized environments where the work is being done, and you build systems that are extremely resilient, and you make use of the sensors that are available and becoming smaller and cheaper, and there's just a whole world of things that we can do to unlock human potential, and that is what I find to be so just transcendent and exciting about the world that we're living in. Of course, the opportunity that I'm developing, but even beyond. But I would say, just in general, I guess as a parting thought, my there's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of predictions and things that we could discuss and we'll continue to hear, I think, in the headlines. But you're bringing it down to just the most basic human fundamental principles. Like, life is short. It's long, but it's short. And we have one life to live. I suspect that, the heart also comes from young people kind of moving in the direction of realizing that, the brevity of their life as well, and actually choosing to do things that are good in the world. And especially as these decisions become less monetarily driven, as I would imagine they will with, the abundance concept, people will choose to go in the direction of whatever their passions are. And hopefully that some of them and many of them are to the betterment of the, the collective, or, and others. And I would like to think that could be a trend that would really help transform and take us kind of further into that world. I know those are some ideals that I've taken from my parents and my grandparents, and they've served us well. So yeah, it's a great honor to be working on something that has the potential to help a lot of people.
It's a great honor for us to be investors in you, and I'm looking forward to it being wildly successful and continuing to help along the way.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, you guys have been such tremendous supporters, and every bit of that has helped. So I'm very deeply grateful for that, and the work that you've done here in Austin to pull so many bright minds together. And nothing happens alone. It is the collective unlock that I think really makes all the difference. So
I've said since the beginning of Love Conquers Fear, it's Team Humanity all the way.
Yeah, that's well played.
I appreciate it, brother. Yeah.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to Love Conquers Fear. I thought that was an amazing episode, deeply soulful, really helping a lot of people out there. And I can't even imagine the potential of that when it goes all over the world. And there's so many obvious adjacencies to outside of firefighting for that to really have an impact. So it's going to be amazing to see Sam and his team unfold over the years, and just really proud to be a part of it. Amazing guest coming up. As I said on prior episodes, I am fully booked until the end of February. I'm starting to book into March now. So you'll see a lot of episodes launching, and really appreciate all the love everybody's giving. I'm seeing a real heart shift out there. I'm having a lot of messages now every day from people who this is really impacting. And stay tuned. Thanks for all the love. Keep on sharing it. And Team Humanity all the way. Thank you.